Howdy. Hey everybody, been a little while since I've been able to do the podcast. I've been taking through a couple different changes last couple weeks, but I am doing the thing. Doing the multiple things. Got a couple things on my plate that I have to take care of. We'll see, coming soon. Now I did say that I would, kind of like come down on this on this or I would, at least kind of explain my what I think about, hip hop today and whatnot. And I didn't realize that would be such a hard question because, I didn't realize how much I had in how involved it was in my life and how much I had involved myself, with that. And, I don't see. Here's the thing. I think there's a basic problem. You can't. The hip hop of the '90s is not what is happening today. There has been a lot of development in different directions, and I can kind of get into the weeds about different things, which I will in the future. But I did want to just at least say something about the two favorites, and there's it's just different. There's different questions. And so, I think ultimately, is it good? Is it bad? Isn't the question. At least not the first question, because it's like, well, what are some of these guys saying, and what are they doing? Like Don Toliver sings. You know what I mean? And like that's, you just can't. I couldn't dispute that. You couldn't dispute that. You know what I mean? Is it on that like trap sort of esque? It's hard. I'm not even gonna. I don't even want to categorize it. They the hi hats. It's, you know what I mean? The different like kind of sounds, but also what they talk about. You know what I mean? I think about Don Toliver a lot because I listen to him a lot. I listened to him a lot over the course of like last whatever, however, like it was when I was working at Continental, and this is a little while ago. Maybe hoping to. We'll just other things got to get worked out. It's basic, basically. But I think that he's been kind of interesting. I would think I've talked to my sister about him before, but hold on a second. Howdy, folks. My mom came up the stairs, so I had to deal with some things that she was asking me to take care of. Hold on. I hope this audio is okay. Always something. But it might have been too loud. Sorry. But so yeah, the what I think about when it comes to hip hop, that question, but also it's just is interesting. It's a sort of like a especially in some of the times that it's occurring. There's various like geopolitical currents. The historical development, and a lot of I would say a lot of those guys, they're not just like like that's not the sound anymore. You know what I mean? The sound is more like it's more like singing than it is, I would say, just just like on a mic, just like talking. You know what I mean? On a beat, and so on just a level of the sound itself, it's like it's kind of a development back almost towards singing. Back toward like what we've done historically for thousands and thousands of years. You know what I mean? So just on that level, I think there's an important there's an important point uh, to be made. Like I think that you know guys like Don Toliver, guys like The Weeknd, like dip into different like things and avenues. You know what I mean? But ultimately, it's very like African slash African American. So the Weeknd, for example, he's Ethiopian. Like and singing, and but it's interesting in terms of his trajectory. Like he starts with like like I think it was House of Balloons, which I listened to a lot in high school. Not even gonna lie on that one. I listened to him a lot. And he I mean, where he's landing now, I don't know if anyone has heard the album Dawn FM, and I think what's interesting about the Weeknd is that he, I think especially with the new show Idol, which I have not finished. I heard the ending. They stay together, which they're like, oh, that's so bad. I don't see that as a bad thing particularly. I have to get into more of it because they love each other at the end of the day, from what I can see. Because it seems like he's laying out. I could be wrong. I haven't finished the Idol. No HBO. And so I think, and then Don Toliver is also interesting to me because he sings. I told my sister that I think he's one of the last black men in America that loves women, and I say that because he clearly. You know what I mean? At them strip clubs, and what I mean. The imagery is very old school, especially with the new album. And his how can I say this? What is the album's name? It is not The Life of Don. I could look it up, but I wanted to remember it, just to case in point this thing. You know what I mean? So I think whatever the name of the new album was, I can't even tell you. I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head if I. All right. Googling it right now. His new album was called Lovesick. Son of a. That boy, he doesn't miss. He doesn't miss. I'm just saying. I think he truly is. Because there's a lot of just a certain a reverence for women, which I think is interesting, especially in a time when men and women, there's like a clear divide. I think it's easy to make it a color thing. It's easy to make it like a religion thing. I don't hear none of that. I just hear the story. The stories that he's kind of telling, and So when it comes to The Weeknd, it's like. That boy doubly didn't, he's like, I don't think he's ever missed one time in his career. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an overstep. You know what I mean? And I think that's, I think I hear the criticism of it saying, okay, well that's, like R&B. But it seems like, with Don Toliver, especially coming out of like AMP, I think that was the album. Almost like a rock star kind of like slash. And you can that would be, I would say, the title of it. I don't deal with the super categories. You categorize whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, different songs where it's kind of like, it feels like more of like a lashing out. But now it seems like it's like he said, he got his anger out. You know what I mean? And so you have to go through a lot to get to that place, which is not easy, especially when you're dealing with a whole lot, which I definitely respect. you know, the weekend with you know, Bella Hadid, and I don't know. Gotta look into that a little bit more. Really, not my business. Really, not my business. If I was to get into it, it would only be to, like, okay, well, just support, you know, the decision of those two people. You know what I mean? But uh, Baby Keem had a good line, you know, and he said, you know, um, some they want to some invade on a one-on-one conversation. That stuck out to me a lot because that happens a lot. You talk to somebody, you know, whatever, and then, you know, oh, get them girls off the stage because somebody's gonna get taken, somebody's gonna invade on a one-on-one conversation, and so I think you know, so a lot of these guys, like, I mean, they're kind of like moving toward, like, it's moving toward more of like a more like it's it's a certain there's a certain positive nature that's kind of taken on when when somebody is able to tell the truth, you know, about a situation. I would put it on like a three scale, kind of like a, not like a three, but maybe even a four. I don't know, because, you know, there's different ways of like approaching a problem. So I would say to kind of have it, you know, to think about it a little bit in more basic terms. I think there's, you know, because in the Baldwinian sense, you know, or in the, you know, after, you know, looking at figures like James Baldwin, um, I I'm sorry. To go back, my sister initially gave me the Baldwin book in high school, um, and we had an African American history teacher which I disagreed with, on, you know, just several points in, you know, what he was teaching with the class, you know, and so she had given me the book, but I didn't read it until my friend Jeremiah, from the free school. Uh, you know, kind of like we had talked a lot. We had talked a lot over the over that, what was it, winter of 2020 something, and 2020, and I think that, you know, I mean, beautiful guy, man. I used to call him beautiful, gorgeous Jeremiah Kim. You know what I mean? And I'm not, you know, I don't, not that's from, not from me personally. You know, to get into the super personals, if really everybody must know. Um, but, you know, great guy. You know, great group of people. I learned a lot, and so, um, you know, so he had kind of like like, okay, well, Serafina had said it to me first, and I didn't get it until maybe somebody else, you know, had said it, you know, to me. So, um, and so I think that when it comes to Baldwin, and he has the book Another Country, um, and there's an interesting tie-in because, you know, Baldwin was, you know, he was able to kind of like articulate um, the fact that, you know, what Baby Keem put in like a sentence. Like, it was really interesting, you know, like you know, if like when you kind of like deal with different. How can I put this? In the story, the guy, he had fallen. It was a black guy who fell in love with a white woman. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing because this was just the beginning. And it was about his. It was that black guy had tied into his friend Eugene, which I think was if I remember correctly on the Baldwin Nikki Giovanni conversation. He had said black actor. Didn't know that was a black actor, quote unquote. And I would say a person, who's darker than blue to reference Curtis Mayfield, but but he was able to articulate, I would say. I hope I have been recording myself because, oh my god, I think I have. Okay, beautiful. Very weird for a second there. I you know I I I think that just thinking. I think that Don lost my train of thought. But James Baldwin was able to this young black man Eugene who he was trying to put himself in the shoes, which I think he did a magnificent job. And he so Eugene, he had similarly fell in love with a white woman, and he had was asking for favor from the family and for X, Y, and Z. And so it's like, well, I think Eugene was ultimately right for that, but it's like the spirit of, I would say, because it's like a mix of different things that that occurred. It was I think at the time it must have been the 40s, because he was saying he was a quote Trotskyite before or he had hated Stalin before it was cool to hate Stalin, kind of so to speak. And so so that was during those days when he had written works. It was like notes. The Fire Next Time was later, so notes of a native son came first, and then there was the question. Then there was and then there was hold on a second. That's James Baldwin. Right. Notes of an son. Right. The Fire Next Time, but in between those two was because that man was writing, and it wasn't nothing personal. It was wow, yeah. Excuse my French. It was not Notes of a Native Son. It was, but it wasn't. the fire next time. It was the one in between the essay, the collected essays. I think it was Nobody Knows My Name, and that was right before he had written Another Country, and so that was kind of it was Hugh at that time was I believe it would have been 61. He would have been about 40, about 39. So he had so his friend had passed away when he was in his 20s. So Baldwin, he had, and that's where he had, kind of basically fled, to France, because he just didn't feel like he was he didn't feel like he was gonna survive, and he he left, and he left. Yeah, he left America because he had said he had tossed the rings, because he was engaged to a woman at the time. Yeah, he tossed the rings into the ocean, or into the river in New York, and he shortly after packed his things, and it was definitely a tear-filled goodbye. It's like I see it in my head, you know what I mean? But he had left. He had left. He had left. Left America. He had fled during the. It was at kind of almost the almost the beginning of, or he had come back during the McCarthy era, so he kind of like came back. He came back when he must have come back to he came back during the when the civil rights movement had begun to occur, and so he so what was interesting about Baldwin was that he was able to, I mean, articulate in such a long, in such a with such a real detail. As such a real detail. About how he was able. Yeah, a lot going on, but he was able to articulate the fact that he was able to tell this story about his friend Eugene, who killed himself because like, if I was to put it in my own words, I would say that Eugene loved this girl, and I think there was a certain spiritual nature, definitely religious nature kind of takes on a nature form. You know what I mean? Um, but he was able to like he still loved this white woman, which at the time, you got spat on. Um, uh, um, and it's interesting because he inversed it. Um, genius. Just, I mean, beautiful. I appreciate his articulation of it because he was able to say like this is how I kind of like this is how I feel, this is how I like this, I want to love this person but I can't. So when the character, whose name I cannot remember, I think it was Rufus. Yeah, Rufus was when he was he was like, I'm not going home, I can't go home, he had said, and so since and that home is kind of like where you make it, um and if that's like slowly taken away from you, or if that's like whatever, it becomes a thing where it's becomes truly heartbreaking. You know what I mean? And the story. I mean, I'm not gonna get into the second part. We'll get into the second part later, and I'll tie it back into Baby Keem. Everybody, please stay patient. um, he loved this white woman, right? And can we please, for a second? I mean, just to think about it. To think about it. I mean, Rufus. Um, Wanted to love his, well, at least the woman that he like decided, like, okay, well, that's the woman that I love, you know what I mean? And so it then became a thing where I think they loved each other. They were like, out on the. I remember. I can see it in my head. They were out on the balcony. You know what I mean? Just it didn't matter. Just didn't matter. And so, but it kept spiraling. The situation kept spiraling, and like the parents didn't approve. She was taken back down south, and she had gone to a mental, a mental institution, and didn't get any help there. And you know, he was able, but so ultimately, like, he was like walking around. Rufus was walking around, no money, and he had said that, oh, there was a guy who came up to him, I'll give you food, I'll give you, whatever you want. You just, because he was peddling his ass was the word, used, or and so he, I think that ultimately, he was like, at that point, just so the character Rufus was just so broken, um, that he's like, I'm not gonna go home, and so he gets on the subway, and this is, to parallel with Eugene, who, there was an essay, and I forget which one off the top of my head, where, Baldwin found out. Somebody had said, "Oh, you didn't hear, Gene's dead." And so to tie into this, Rufus, character, Rufus was taking the sub, and excuse me. He he was like, he was able to articulate he was able to articulate a Rufus's suicide, and the last thing, when he jumped off, he got into the bridge and he was looking over, and when he jumped, he said, God, I'm coming for you, motherfucker, I'm coming for you, and so, and that, Baldwin at the time, he was dealing with a lot, he left to France, and he says he was unwell, but he was dealing, later he'll say, he was dealing with the holy roller, white god thing, you know what I mean, and so it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like, well, was he... This is kind of like what he's talking about when he was saying, like, when you can't love the woman that you love. You know what I mean? When there's something constantly getting in the way, or as Baby Keem said, in somebody invading on a really, what is a one-on-one conversation. So I think that ultimately it comes to a place where, like, there's when we look back at our history, like kind of where we come from, we're able to see there's a certain trajectory in a historical movement, and I mean, it seems to me that we're moving toward a real unity, but we have to kind of like work out these differences that we have. You know what I mean? Because I wouldn't say all the what Baby Keem says is right. Like he says the heebie-jeebie talk crazy to me, but heebie-jeebie can talk crazy to me. Man, I don't mind. You know what I mean? And that's just on that level. I mean, it's part of life, and so it's like, well, I think that ultimately it comes to a thing where, we kind of have to look at what people, like, what is said, like, or what people are saying, to understand better, kind of this question of hip hop. You know what I mean? This question of quote hip hop, if you can even really call it hip hop anymore. You know what I mean? I think it goes further. I think there's certain developments, and I think there's regression too. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of these guys, like, it's like Charles White was talking about it in an interview. He had talked about how I think them killers should be, whatever, have whatever, be killed. Like King, like he was talking about King Von. He was talking about, his, King Von was talking about how he was killing people, or murder, or whatever. O Block, whatever. So cool, so fucking cool. Not cool at all. Not cool at all. And so, it's kind of like, well, to kind of get to a place where we have a not like two Americas or three or four or five or six or seven or eight, Americas. There has to be a, like one question, or like at least like somebody like tell the truth one time. If somebody please tell the truth one time, you know what I mean? So it's like, and I'll say, that I don't like, I don't respect, guys that are, like whatever, pushing dope, drugs, whatever, getting people killed. But I don't I but that doesn't mean I'm coming down and saying that I think that's wrong, period. I don't like that, women are taking on that, on those characteristics. And that's not a color or race thing, because I've seen it. I see it in, the the down. I see it up with different people. Different people. I'm gonna leave that one open ended. You know what I mean? No. I see it in the the Southeast Asian, or the Asian. I see it in the Southeast Asian community, and I see it in the black community. I see it in the white community. And I see. But I also, we can talk about the religious community. I disagree with them. Because we'll look at the language of the Bible. You know what I mean? These people are heathens. I think that's wrong. That doesn't mean I'm gonna go overboard and say, oh well, I'm just gonna do whatever. I think that's wrong too. I think we do have to achieve a type of balance, but we do have to be able to move forward without killing each other. You know what I mean? That takes not only an honest conversation, but a truthful conversation. And I think the delineation there, Baldwin made clear in one of his interviews. He said, or interviews or essays, he had said that, Baldwin, he had said, I gotta collect my thoughts on this one. Don't lie. And then he said you don't have to tell the truth, but don't lie. Now, I disagree with Baldwin on that, personally. And that's a big thing for me, because I love Baldwin. I love him to death. I do. I once said that he was, that's almost like my pastor. Or my I forget exactly the words. Hopefully somebody can remind me. So I think that ultimately it comes to a thing where, one of the surviving members of the movement, that is the freedom movement. They say the Black Freedom Movement, as it was articulated. Well, I don't think that's how they called it. I think it was because it wasn't just a Black freedom movement. It was really a world peace movement. It was a peace movement, and King was headed in that direction. And so, as one of the foremost members of that movement, because he had talked about Medgar Evers, he had talked about Malcolm X, he talked about King, but he didn't really talk about himself. He was the bigger brother, and he watched them all die. Right? That was the fire. The documentary. But I don't think he had really seen what he did, and being able to look at figures like Huey, or figures like Malcolm, and actually bring them to life, through different works. And so it was a thing where he was he was able to say like he was able to like basically articulate that let me see. He was able to articulate the fact that he was able to bring these people to life. And I think that, telling the story truthfully, you know, and he loved these people, like he loved everybody, and in a lot of ways he was having survived. He didn't see himself as like a quote leader because that's the categories thing. He never liked that. Never liked that. Never wanted to do the categories thing. But he was able to deal with the fact that he was able to deal with the fact that he lived it. He lived, and I mean, he gave us something so beautiful in the fact that he had oh, excuse me. Sorry, stretching. And the fact that he was able to still at the end of the day just bear witness, but I think by doing that, and he testified, y'all, he didn't just bear witness, he testified. Let's get that straight, okay? He didn't just bear witness. He testified. And I think what's interesting about that is that, he did a lot of heroic things. And I think that, and we can split hairs on, I think there's a certain question of articulation. The English, I think the English language, I mean, there's just basic flaws in it. Shakespearean English is much closer, and Southern, much closer to being able to articulate, or even they say Spanglish, you know what I mean, or the Southern, you know what I mean, or the we're figuring out Chinese, there's a whole lot of ways to say, but because of it, it's kind of the sentence structure. But we can get into that. That's going to be the next episode. That's going to be the next episode. But I think what's important is in Baldwin's articulation. Is that there's a certain trajectory in having, and when you read it, you see that you see there's a different way to live, which if you read Just Above My Head, you kind of see that, or kind of like what he means by that, because that's his final, or one of his final works. And he was able to he was able to say, like the price of like not being able to love somebody in various ways. There was the question of Crunch, the question of Peanut, the different, the group of doo-wop singers, and so. But I like, so coming back to, Baby Keem, which is interesting because that's Kendrick Lamar's nephew, from what I am kind of like gathering. He was able to these a lot of these different guys are articulating something similar, and there's a basic problem of humanity. One of the basic problems of humanity, which is love. You know what I mean? And you go down to places like Maryland, you'll see that they was breeding us. They was definitely breeding us, and they bred themselves too. That was, and there was it was an absolute atrocity. You know what I mean? There is the question of reparations that's on the table. You know what I mean? But reparations is a discussion that has to be had. You know what I mean? It's like a conversation, not a conversation. I could get into it. I think that I take my form of reparations. We can really talk about that. Because there's just different problems. But I think that there's, for example, in my opinion, I'm not going to bring it to the question of reparations yet, because I don't think that's really what is on the table right now. I'm thinking about Germantown. There's the question of Germantown High School, which is, I just feel like there's a community discussion that has to be had, in my opinion, just, in mine. So, but ultimately, it comes to when it comes to this question of hip hop, like, these guys have a choice. These people, men, women, y'all, everybody has a choice. Do we go like backward, and really enslave ourselves to whatever, or do we, go forward into like new people, which Fidel kind of articulated, and as he said, "May history absolve me." You know what I mean? For the things that I've done. That's not. I don't know if that was a direct quote, but I think ultimately it comes to a thing where he. I think there's an interesting like sort of parallel. Like there's there's Fidel, and then Du Bois had the work, which I haven't read. His book about building a school. And the Mansart trilogy. And so that's another thing that we would have. I mean, the organization I'm part of, called the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation. One of the various organizations that various organizations that I do I don't know how to put it. I work with everybody. But that's the organization that I've been going for 4 years. And I don't plan on leaving. I don't know if I ever said that, but I think that just different discussions have to be had. But I think ultimately it comes to a thing where Fidel is basically right. We are when we're dealing with different problems, like my sister had she had told me about how 90% of Fidel's work was out, wasn't 90% of it was out of his office, 10% was in the office. So I think he is definitely the model for a new man, for the new man. And so I think I think that we have to kind of figure out what Fidel meant, because it new man. I'm like literally the generation after my parents. You know what I mean? So I'm can be considered like the next step of humanity, but so could literally anybody else. In America, China, wherever. And so we all kind of have like a certain role in each other's lives. And we have to kind of learn how to like deal with each other if we're going to survive, because it seems like we're kind of headed toward war, which I am not a fan of. I would not like to go to war with China or Russia, and I would not like to go to war with I'm not going to Ukraine. I am not going to serve in Ukraine, like Muhammad Ali said. You know what I mean? Well, those them Ukraine. I mean, they got Nazis. What are we talking about here, ladies and gentlemen? It's no contest, in my opinion. Excuse me, I don't mean to raise my voice, but there's no contest. There is no contest. I mean, how can we say that the Ukrainians? Well, I've met a couple. Nice enough people. How can you say that the people got an Azov battalion? The development was from the NED. I mean, what are we talking about here? What are we talking? I mean, is there a contest? No. This is a silly war for an oligarch, Joe Biden. And if he wants to go to war, send your son. Send Hunter. Oh yeah, he was there making money, right? $80,000 a month, right? Smoking crack, dealing with the. Okay, so I'm gonna let that point rest, and we can let that marinate, and kind of go from there. We can kind of go from there, and I think there's a lot of discussions that need to be had. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. That's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. I know we went from Baby Keem to Baldwin, to tie it all back together. I would say that hip hop is developing back into song, but these are these quote artists, these people that do make art, like they have a choice. It's like Paul Robeson said. The artist has, quote artists. I don't put it in the categories, because comes from the Roman tradition, slavery, basically, of thought, and so you kind of like, it's kind of like, if you want a person to be seen as a person, you have to deal with them as such, and listen to them, listen to what they say. And so it comes to me to be a thing where, like, and I can go off on different tangents, but when it comes to excuse me, the new, when it comes to new, when it comes to these guys that do art, we all have a choice as to what we put out into the world and what kind of energies as well. Oh my god, did my fucking computer just... Oh, excuse my French. sorry. 50%. Okay, cool. When it comes to these different art, like quote artists, like these young guys, young ladies, young men and women, older men and women, just men and women, we have a choice on how we deal with each other. You know what I mean? we have a choice on like what we how we yeah, how we deal with each other and what we say and do to each other. You know what I mean? I think that ultimately, it comes to be a thing where we're at a place, um, ultimately it becomes like a thing where we have to learn to listen to each other. You know what I mean? But also, you can't just toss somebody aside if they don't behave the way you want them to behave. So it's like, and I don't think that well, I'll let that stand on its own. I guess that's a little bit of and that ties into these, these. I mean, you can't just, okay, well, a killer was just a killer. I disagree with that because King Von, I don't know if he, he just woke up one day and said, I'm gonna kill somebody. It developed. It developed. You know what I mean? And I think that what's important there is that it's kind of like, okay, well, what happened in that situation, and you know what I mean? But I don't disagree with Charles White. Charles. When he had said that, because like we do need to be able to stand up to each other if we're treating each other badly. Period. So, it comes to a thing where you can't like for the first reaction can't be like automatically like, oh, I didn't do what you asked me to do. Okay, let's fight. And I disagree with that, even though that we could do that. I won't solve the problem, but if we're trying to get our frustrations out, it demonstrates perfectly that we're taking it out on each other. So, in that way, and I've done whatever. I think that I take it on myself. I'm sorry. Look, and I'm sorry. I did it. I and we're talking about various things. I done did it. It was. So we did a lot. But Don Toliver has a line. Here's a toast to doing the most. Doing the most. So I to quote. You know what I mean. But I think I did definitely did a lot personally. But we can kind of get into that. It's a personal. So I think ultimately it comes to a thing where now it's a conversation about love. Oh my gosh, these things definitely do spiral. I think that love is everybody has that right to think for themselves and to love who they choose, and so that's going to be, at the end of the day, it comes to be a thing where so I think ultimately comes to a thing where we a lot of things have to get worked out. I think that but it's like we all have a choice on how. So I see, Baby King came out with a new song, The Hillbillies, and it does have those melodic qualities that that is natural to the African tradition, African American tradition, you know what I mean, Chinese tradition, the world tradition. Songs of My People is a must read by Robeson, but or you can look at Belafonte. Know what I mean? With a lot of very interesting, peoples we can kind of talk about. But I think that it comes to a thing where ultimately, it's like, I think that we'll kind of see, because there's a lot of different moving parts to what I'm saying. But I think these guys, like, you have a choice on how you deal with people. You know what I mean? And every choice has a consequence. I think Charles White articulated that well with King Von's death. Like, he's not sad about that. He said he wasn't sad about that, and I was like, damn, because he just, in terms of being able to, like, when you kill, like, when because one of the things that Charles White said was that he he was happy that, because he was, King Von was, he'd gotten off for the crimes that he had committed, but he still, like, went ahead and rapped about this, the stuff that he had done, and kind of, made life hell for the families of these peoples. And it was really, I mean, in that way, it's really sad, because a lot of people now, like, they don't come out their house because of all the stuff that's going on, and so it comes to be a thing where we all have a choice in that. We all have a choice in what we, like, do now that we've done what we've done. Do we continue to walk the same path of immiseration, like greed, destruction, murder? Do we walk that same path, or do we choose to walk the path of doing one thing that's right, or one thing that makes us happy? You know what I mean? So I think that ultimately it comes to a thing where, we have to deal with the basic fact, of, like, or the truth that, when we love each other, there's a lot we have to deal with, and that's the price of it. And so we have to deal with a lot. Like, we have to deal with so much more than I think we are dealing with. You know what I mean? So, which, case in point, the King Von, the killer stuff. That wasn't like that's not cool. I don't like that. I think it's wrong. I think there is a better way, and I think, people that do music, like, let's say the Weeknd, or let's say Don Toliver, like I was talking about before, and Baby Keem. And there's this question of Kendrick. We'll talk about it in the next one, but I think those, to me, are the big three guys. I mean, in my opinion, that's personal. So I think that ultimately we have to kind of look at like like I guess the question is like what are the things that we can do that can help each other, you know what I mean? And so I think killing killing each other, like all the shooting and killing, and oh wow, so great. I'm so glad we shot and killed each other. That was so fun. I enjoyed that so much. um but I think ultimately, like, a lot of these things can be basically water under the bridge, if we can start to take steps in the right direction. You know what I mean? I'll be the first one to admit. I have made very many big time mistakes, but I think that ultimately everybody. I mean, we have a lot of different choices in front of us, and so definitely I love you all. Peace, definitely peace. I hope we have a peaceful night, and I think we gotta kind of like deal with. We got to kind of deal with the basic fact, the basic fact of that we are, everything, it's life is a process. We develop. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, well, if you push yourself in whatever way, you get different, you achieve different things in life. You know what I mean? And so it's a question on what can you achieve with what you have, but also with where you want and need to go. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the response or hearing what people kind of think about this one. There was a lot of things. I don't know how long I took today. I hope I didn't take too much time. But if I did, it's really not the end of the world, because sometimes you gotta take time to get to the right place. So we gotta kind of discuss. Ooh, got a little lightheaded there. We gotta kind of discuss, like, just going forward, different elements. I will say, if y'all want to reach me, my phone is broken, and my Instagram had gotten hacked pretty bad. So I made a new Instagram, Young Robeson 7. My Twitter, if you really want to get to know me, and I say this with caution, Young Robeson. And the YouTube is the Jacob Harris Show. But we will see. I think that there's a lot of things that we will discuss. I think that, which I think is, there's a lot of beauty in the potential that we have here in Philly and across the world. You know what I mean? I'm not going to sit up here and talk about, say, China is this, or Russia is this, or India is this, when I haven't dealt with what's happening at home. You know what I mean? Because, a great man once told me, it starts at home. You know what I mean? And so that's true. That's true in some ways. And in other ways, we can talk about it in the next episode. Maybe I'll have some guests. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? So, yeah, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure it out. But as time goes on, we will see. We will see what happens. We will see what happens. Okay, signing off. Jacob Harris Show, TikTok, also Young Robeson. I will talk to y'all soon. Ciao, sayonara. 6:49, September 7th. Mom's birthday is coming up. Gotta figure that one out. Alright, love y'all. And this was something I got from TikTok. It was a Buddhist monk. Excuse me. He said, do one thing, do what makes you happy. Do what makes you happy. And I think there's almost a damn near flawless logic in that. Because, if you do one thing, you have to figure that out. What actually makes you happy and what actually, because it's the pursuit of happiness, they say, or the, there's the mandate of heaven, which, in China, which, it's like, basically the social contract is, the striving is toward happiness, like to make the basically the line of the party is to make the people happy. So I think, which I respect that, and I do love that. So we will see about different things going forward. I am currently in my room. I do not have the air conditioning on, so I am sweating so much. Sweating. Just a lot of sweat. So we'll kind of see. We'll kind of see how things go moving forward. But and I would add to, do one thing that makes you happy. Tell the truth about one thing today. See what happens. You never know. Okay. 3 things. Okay, so first, do one thing that makes you happy today. Do one thing. Tell the truth one time today. Let's just see what happens. And then the third thing I would say is do something for somebody else. Wasn't what I was gonna say. Can't remember off the top of my head. Sweating. Definitely sweating on this one. But we shall see. So, love y'all. Peace. Let me know what y'all think. I'm excited to hear the what the discussion about this one will where it'll go. But I love y'all. Ciao. I'm gonna upload this tonight. That's the goals. And goals are important. We're gonna talk about it. Love you guys. Have a good one. All right, I'll talk to you soon.